the largest custody bank on planet Earth, a bank sitting on more than $50 trillion, just sent a letter to its clients. And in that letter, it said something that should stop every XRP holder cold. It is rebuilding the United States Treasury market to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The Treasury market, $30 trillion, the bedrock of the entire global financial system, going always on. Now here's the part that made me sit up. The test that proved it could actually work, Ripple was in it. Not a rumor, not a prediction, not some anonymous account with a rocket emoji. A completed transaction, executed after the US government's own settlement system had already closed for the night. The window was shut. The trade happened anyway. And Ripple was standing right there when it did. And that's just the start, because in the same 48 hours, Ripple launched a brand new institutional platform, and XRP quietly hit a milestone almost nobody reported. There is so much here. Stick with me. I'm going to show you exactly where XRP sits inside a $50 trillion machine. Let's dig in, real quick, from me to you. I'm not a financial advisor, and this isn't financial advice. And I'll do what I always do. Separate what's confirmed from what's still being built, so you always know exactly what you're looking at. Never risk what you can't afford to lose, and always do your own research. Cool? All right, let's get into it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Crypto with BHW, where we tell it to you straight with heart. Grab your coffee, get comfy, because this week, the plumbing of global finance moved a little closer to XRP's world, and I want you to see every piece of it. Let's go. All right, let me tell you this story properly, because it's genuinely fascinating and almost nobody's explaining it right. Here's something most people don't know about how the financial system actually works. The US Treasury market, $30 trillion of it, doesn't run all the time. It runs on business hours. There's a system called Fedwire run by the Federal Reserve, and when Fedwire closes for the day, that's it. Treasury settlement is done until tomorrow morning. Now here's the problem that creates in a crypto world. Stablecoins never sleep. They can be minted and redeemed at 3 in the morning on a Sunday, but the treasuries backing those stablecoins, those can only move during weekday banking hours. So you've got this weird mismatch. The digital layer runs 24/7 and the asset layer underneath it clocks out at 5. That's the gap. And earlier this year, BNY Mellon decided to test whether that gap could be closed. So they ran a treasury transaction after the Fedwire security service had already shut down for the day. And who was in that trade? Ripple E as the issuer of RLUSD, alongside Dreyfus, BNY's cash management arm, acting for OpenEden, which issues USDO. The trade was executed through Tradeweb and settled shortly after through existing cash rails. Read that again. The government's settlement window was closed, and a treasury transaction tied to stablecoin reserves happened anyway. That's not a press release. That's a proof of concept, with real money, real counterparties, and Ripple standing right in the middle of it. And it clearly worked because on Wednesday, BNY sent a letter to clients, signed by 4 senior executives, laying out where this goes next. Tokenized treasury products and pilot trades on their own private blockchain by the end of 2026, and then full 24/7 settlement for both conventional and tokenized treasuries in 2027. The biggest custody bank in the world is rewiring the bedrock of global finance, and Ripple was in the room for the experiment that started it. So the obvious question, the one you're already asking, is what does this actually mean for XRP? And I want to answer that honestly, because the honest answer is the one that'll make you more excited, not less. Let me explain. Okay? Let's be precise here, because precision is what separates you from 99% of the people talking about this today. What BNY announced is a roadmap for always-on treasury settlement. What was involved from Ripple's side was RLUSD, Ripple's regulated dollar stablecoin, not XRP, the token. And in that specific after-hours test, the securities themselves weren't even tokenized yet. It was a demonstration that treasury activity tied to stablecoin reserves can keep moving after the main window closes. So no, BNY did not choose XRP for payments. I'm not going to tell you it did, because you'd find out eventually, and then you'd never trust me again. But now let me tell you why I'm genuinely, seriously excited about this, and it's not spin. Think about what Ripple's position here actually is. BNY Mellon is the custodian for RLUSD's reserves. That relationship already exists. And when the world's largest custody bank wanted to run a first-of-its-kind experiment to prove the future of Treasury settlement, out of everyone on Earth they could have partnered with, Ripple was one of two stablecoin issuers in the room. Jack McDonald, Ripple's senior vice president of stablecoins, publicly congratulated BNY and said RLUSD is designed to help support exactly this evolution: continuous treasury markets and institutional digital asset infrastructure. So here's my honest read, and I'll frame it as opinion. This isn't XRP's finish line. This is Chapter 1. And Chapter 1 is exactly where you want to be standing. Because the alternative, finding out about this after it's fully built, priced in, and everyone's talking about it, that's Chapter 20. Being early is uncomfortable. It's also the only place real advantage lives. And there's a reason RLUSD being in the room matters for XRP specifically. Let me show you. Because RLUSD doesn't float in space. It lives somewhere. And where it lives is the whole point. It's the connection almost everyone this week has completely skipped over. All right? This is the part I really want to land, so let me build it carefully. RLUSD is multi-chain. It runs on Ethereum, and it runs on the XRP Ledger. That's not a small detail. That's the detail. Because here's how blockchains work. When something moves on the XRP Ledger, it costs a tiny transaction fee, and that fee is paid in XRP, and it's destroyed, permanently removed from supply. So every RLUSD transaction that settles on the XRP Ledger is activity on XRP's network, using XRP's rails, burning a small amount of XRP. Now scale that thought up. If RLUSD becomes a core settlement instrument in a 24/7 treasury market touching a $50 trillion custody bank, where does a big chunk of that activity settle? On the ledger XRP powers. Quick one before we go further. Did you know RLUSD actually runs on the XRP Ledger? So activity there touches XRP directly? A lot of people have no idea. Type yes or no in the comments. I really want to see. And Ripple isn't sitting still on this either. In the same 48-hour window, they launched something called Ripple Mint, a unified platform built specifically for institutions to mint, redeem, and manage RLUSD at scale. And the design tells you everything about who it's for. It has both a user interface and API access, so institutions can fully automate their stablecoin operations. It lets them bridge RLUSD across chains, track funds through the entire lifecycle of a transaction, plug RLUSD directly into their own internal systems and workflows. That's not a retail product. Nobody builds API automation and cross-chain treasury tooling for people buying $50 of crypto on their phone. That's built for banks, funds, and payment companies moving serious volume for the exact institutions BNY serves. And for the record, since I saw this misreported RLUSD is issued under Standard Custody and Trust Company, a New York Department of Financial Services chartered trust company, not a different bank with a similar name. Details matter, and that regulatory structure is a huge part of why institutions will touch it at all. So put the pieces together. BNY builds always-on treasury rails. RLUSD is one of the stablecoins proving it works. RLUSD runs on the XRP Ledger, and Ripple just shipped the institutional tooling to scale RLUSD everywhere. That's not 4 separate headlines. That's one machine being assembled. And here's what makes me most optimistic, because while all that institutional stuff was happening at the top, something else was quietly happening at the ground level. And it involves XRP directly, not through a stablecoin. Let me show you. Okay, let's talk about the stuff that got almost zero coverage this week, because honestly, it might matter just as much. First, the ledger itself is upgrading. Version 3.2.0 of the XRP Ledger has hit around 66% validator adoption. Now, that number matters because upgrades on XRPL don't happen by decree. Validators have to actually agree, and you need broad consensus before anything activates. So 66% means the network is actively moving forward in the open with real participation. The infrastructure isn't frozen waiting for a bull market. It's shipping. Second, how XRP as direct collateral is becoming a real product. MetalPay, a stablecoin payments fintech with around 8 million registered users across 100 countries, processing roughly 12 billion in annualized volume, launched a card built on the XRP Ledger. And here's how it works. Users can pledge their XRP as collateral for a credit line at 50% loan to value, settled through RLUSD on the XRP Ledger, and then spend it anywhere through Visa rails. Sit with what that actually means. Someone can hold their XRP, borrow against it, and go buy groceries without ever selling a token. That is XRP functioning as productive collateral in the real world for regular people, not a white paper, a card. Third, the ETFs keep absorbing supply. US spot XRP ETFs are creeping toward a major milestone, around 977 million XRP held, closing in on a full billion, and the names showing up in filings aren't only crypto shops anymore. UBS, Morgan Stanley, and a growing list of smaller advisory firms have disclosed XRP ETF exposure. Every coin that goes into an ETF is a coin sitting still, not circulating, not for sale. And one more you'll remember from our last video. Ripple Prime has begun issuing depository receipts against XRP, so institutions can post XRP as collateral, get dollar credit, and trade I without selling. You see the theme? Ledger upgrading. XRP working as collateral for consumers and institutions, supply getting locked into ETFs, all of it happening quietly during a slow market while everyone was staring at the price. So let's bring it all the way home. What does this actually mean for you? And what should you be watching from here? Let's put the honest scorecard down. All right, let me give it to you straight, the way I'd tell a friend across the table. Here's the honest scorecard. Did BNY Mellon choose XRP for payments? No? And don't let a thumbnail tell you otherwise. Is BNY building always-on Treasury settlement with Ripple already inside the proving ground? Yes, absolutely, and that's documented. Does RLUSD run on the XRP Ledger, meaning its growth is XRP Ledger growth? Yes. Is XRP already working as collateral in real products for real people today? Also, yes. So here's my read, and I want you to hear the optimism because it's grounded, not despite it. What's happening right now is that XRP's ecosystem is being wired into the highest levels of traditional finance, quietly, structurally, and in a way that doesn't reverse. Announcements can be walked back. Partnerships can end. But once a stablecoin is embedded in a custody bank's settlement architecture, once a ledger is carrying institutional flows, once XRP is on collateral sheets and inside ETFs, that's not a headline. That's infrastructure, and infrastructure compounds. And notice the timing, because this is the part I love. All of this is happening while the market is quiet, while the price is boring, while most people have looked away. The tokenized money market fund space is still only a few $1 billion, with projections of several times that by the end of this year, against a $30 trillion Treasury market, we are so early it's almost funny. So what do you actually watch from here? 3 things. 1, does BNY hit its own timeline, tokenized Treasury pilots on their private chain by the end of 2026? 2, does RLUSD's volume on the XRP ledger keep climbing because that's the most direct XRP signal in this entire story? 3, do the XRP ETFs cross that 1 billion mark? Because milestones like that pull in coverage and new eyes. Those are your dominoes, not screaming headlines, not fake tweets, real checkable milestones. And here's the mindset I'd hold. Don't measure this week by what the candle did. Measure it by what got built. Because the people who do well over years in this space are almost never the ones with the best entry price. They're the ones who understood what was being assembled, while it was still being assembled. Zoom out one last time with me. A couple of years ago, people genuinely wondered whether XRP would survive a courtroom. This week, a $50 trillion custody bank ran the future of Treasury settlement with Ripple in the room. Ripple shipped institutional tooling for it, and XRP quietly became something you can borrow against and spend on a Visa card. That arc only points one direction over the long run. We're early. The machine is being built. The pain doesn't last forever. It never does. So here's where I'll leave you. Fam. One closed window. One completed trade. One $50 trillion bank rewriting how money moves. and a community that watches the plumbing instead of the panic. Whatever the next few months bring, green or red, we walk through it together. Clear eyes, steady hands. Because that's what we do here. If this connected the dots for you, do me a favor. Drop your honest thoughts below. Did you know RLUSD runs on the XRP Ledger? I read every single comment. This has been Crypto with BHW, where we tell it straight with heart. Stay ready, stay hopeful, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.